Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Meeting Gold podcast. Jesse, how do you like the intro, buddy?
Cool intro.
Yeah, cool intro, right?
You gotta have that cool intro.
You know, people say they don't love the music, but I think it's a staple at this point.
It's the hook.
It's the hook, right? Anyways, guys, thanks for joining us in today's episode. We got a cancellation, but Jesse is somebody I've been wanting to get on for quite some time, and Jesse was able to come join us today on late notice and join us this morning. We're going to be uploading this episode on Saturday. But Jesse has a really interesting story, which we'll get into. If you like racing, if you follow F1, if you just enjoy speed, I guess, in general, and thinking quick, this guy's the guy you're going to talk to. So Jesse Mason, thank you for joining us on today's episode, brother. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. I mean, this is cool. So one of my first podcasts. So
I'm
happy for that.
I'm taking your podcast virginity.
Yeah, that's I guess that's how you phrase it. But,
I love it. That's literally we had a guest on last week that we did that as well. So it's always a pleasure and it's always a joy. But Jesse, thanks for coming on, man. Can you give us a little background on your life, what you've done, what you did, some incredible things you've done, and then where you are now? Just like a quick minute summary.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, born and raised in Chippewa, grew up in Chippewa on the water, which was a great place to live and grow up. And, my family was always interested in cars and racing. And that filtered down to me and my brother, and we raced up to professionally growing up. And, got to go to a lot of cool places in the world and drive fast cars and race. And then moved on from there, got an engineering degree over in the University of Wales in the UK, and came back and started a development company here in Niagara. We did, pretty large developments all over the world. We did some in the UK, some in the States, some here in Canada. That development company is still going, but while we were doing some of the developments here in Niagara, I saw the opportunity that, hey, we're buying or acquiring these large properties and sometimes disposing of them. And, why don't I get my real estate license to kind of be able to speak to that, speak more, more fluently with, with the rules and with the property owners and with developers. And so that's what I do now. I'm primarily a real estate agent, and, most of my work is in kind of the development side.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for giving us a little shed on everything that you're doing now. I don't want to skim over the professional racer part. I think that's going to be a big topic on today's episode because it's so interesting. But as a nice little hook to our audience here, can you give us your most crazy experience racing? Is there a story that you could tell us that would kind of catch attention?
Well, the thing with racing is pretty dynamic, and there's lots of unique stories. I mean, there's stories of winning, which I was racing in a junior Formula Series when I was 16 here in Canada. Just was racing high level go-karts at the same time, but racing in a Formula Car Series here in Canada, and was doing really well, won most of the races, but we started off the season really poorly. We had a couple car failures in the early races, and the way the points system was structured, it was going to be really difficult for us to win the championship,
right?
Because there wasn't a lot of points dropped between each position. So we got to the final race of the season. I had won, I think, 13 of the 16 races up to that point, and I was still sitting third in the championship. And it was one of those things we could win if we win, and the other guy has, the guy who is leading the championship has a problem. Go into qualifying, and my own mistake. I was passing a slower car in qualifying on my quick lap. Got clipped on the corner, and didn't get a qualifying lap in, so I had to start last, which at that point was 30 something for the race. So we kind of rode off the championship at that point. But I know a lot of athletes talk about they kind of get in the zone. And in the race, I was in the zone and, just was able to move the car, get up to the front, and really drove away and won the race going away. And, and luckily enough, in that case, the guy who was leading the championship 2 laps from the end, he had a car failure. No. So it kind of all the cards fell in our direction. We ended up winning the championship by 2 points, which, that was really special because it was my first season in cars and kind of, was a good springboard.
That was your first season in cars?
Yeah, first season in actual cars. Like I'd done a lot of go-karts.
Yeah.
Before that.
Well, you were 16, was it?
I was 16 at the time, yeah.
Oh my word. So how fast do those cars go at 16?
Well, those cars aren't, the karts were actually quicker. Those cars, they're a small open wheel car and powered by a little Volkswagen Boxer engine, but they would do probably 130 miles an hour, and not overly quick. But as you progress up the levels, you get faster and faster. And for me, luckily enough, I got up and did a couple seasons of Indy Lights, which is the championship right under Indy cars, and we were able to do 210, 212 miles an hour at some of the.
So is that the highest level that you
That's
raced
the
at?
Highest level I got to. I mean, I did some small stuff afterwards, but that was the highest level in terms of the rungs of.
Gotcha. So what was the training regiment like for something like this? I mean, you basically raced. When did you start racing?
So I started racing when I was 8 in karts. You started in a club championship, and then you moved to North America wide championships, and then global championships. So I was lucky enough to race against former world champions like Nico Rosberg when I was in go-karts, for example.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. I bet that's a cool thing to be able to say that you raced against.
Yeah, and I was on a team for Italian kart manufacturer, and I was junior driver, and the senior driver was Fernando Alonso, who was
literally
one of the world champion, and in
Hall of Fame.
In my opinion, and I think in a lot of opinions, probably the best driver currently in the world.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible. So there no short of opportunity, but I mean, you definitely made it for yourself. I was talking to your dad because I saw him when I was with Nelson, and your grandfather and father were also racers. Is that true?
Yeah. So my grandfather, he didn't drive. He had a machinist's background, and he built a lot of karts.
Oh, okay.
Long before I was around, and then so that car I was telling you about in the where we won the championship, he built that car for us too. I mean, he definitely had an engineer's mind and a very practical mind to be able to build things.
That's crazy cool. I could look at an engine and I have no idea what I'm looking at. How are you with engines? Are you you kind of get it, or?
Well, I get it. Like I say, I've got an engineering degree, so I hope I understand. But when it comes to engines are kind of those necessary evil that you put in the back. For me, in racing and car development, suspension and aerodynamics are the areas that were always my focus.
Interesting. That's actually a really interesting point you make. So back to my question, the training regimen on something like this,
yep.
This isn't like you played AAA hockey, you said as well, you played high level sports your entire life.
Yep.
What would training to be a pro F1 driver be like compared to, and I mean, literally training for hockey, like AAA. You would know.
So I mean, for racing, especially at high levels, I mean, you experience a lot of G-forces, which most sports don't get. So you need a lot of upper body and core strength, especially in your neck, right? Because your head is really heavy when you're experiencing 4Gs going through a corner, and you need a lot of endurance to be able to do the whole race and still have that mental acuity and mental focus at the end. So a lot of it is endurance training and core strength training. I mean, you don't necessarily need a lot of leg strength or arm strength, but obviously you do those things to kind of balance your body. And drivers that are in Formula One or racing at a high level are very elite athletes. I mean, they run marathons in their spare time. It's definitely something that most people don't appreciate. They think you sit in the car, you're strapped in, and you turn the wheel. But you definitely need to be in good shape. And on the nutrition side, similar to any high level athlete, it's not about going out partying.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it's about taking care of your body, especially during the season.
Well, I do think that a lot of people, me being accused of this as well, until I met you and your brother, is not understanding fully the hardships of an F1 or F2 or F3 or just any pro driver, not understanding what is put into it. Because I really did honestly think that, yeah, you're just driving car. But then Nelson's telling me that like hitting the brakes is probably one of the hardest things you can do in a race. Can you take us through what's it like to be going, 200 kilometers an hour? You say miles, 200 kilometers, whatever. Sure. And then hitting and literally like slamming on the brakes, but like in a controlled way because these cars can handle it. What's it like?
Yeah. So, I mean, what it's like is, so there's a reading that's called bar, which is a pressure, measurement. And, generally speaking, the drivers who can achieve the most bar or the most brake pressure are able to brake a little bit later, right? And able to control the car, have it come down to the apex speed faster, right? And then,
interesting.
And then, so if you're braking a little bit later than the other guy, you have better opportunity to pass him, and your lap time is generally going to be better because you have less stopping distance, right? So you really got to kind of slam on the brakes as hard as you can for most corners, right? Assuming, the tires have the grip, as the tire grip wears off or reduces, you can't press as hard because you'll lock a tire, which is definitely not what you want to do. But anyway, you hit the brake basically as hard as you can, and you kind of gotta your body wants to submarine in the car. It wants to slide because when you're in the car, you're laying down almost. So right. Your body wants to slide forward because the car is stopping, but you're not, body in motion wants to stay in motion. So it wants to move forward. The belts help you hold you in to a certain degree, but you got to kind of keep yourself back in the car so that your head doesn't slip down so you can't see the apex. So you got to keep yourself up with your arms and your legs while trying to modulate the brakes. It's all, it's a little bit of a dance, and there's a lot of pressure on your body at the time. You got a lot of pressure on your chest. It's not like you can breathe at that time. Right?
Oh my
because
God.
there's a lot of force on you.
So there's breathing techniques and stuff like that. I remember I was asking Nelson some of this, like there's breathing techniques that you guys kind of followed to not, I guess, slide out from under your car.
Yeah, and to keep, your heart rate as level as possible. Like generally speaking, during a race, your heart rate's up around 200, and that's pretty high. So you got to, breathe when you can. And the other thing is with your eyes. There's not, when you're at the limit, you're not blinking very much. So you got to consciously tell yourself, hey, I got to blink so that your eyes don't dry out.
Because you're not even thinking.
Yeah, and you don't want to blink. You're just like this basically the whole race. So you gotta tell yourself to do all these normal things that.
Well, I always say, at least in hockey, like you have a 1 minute. And then it's like you can go on the bench and relax for about 2 minutes, and then back on 1 minute, kill yourself, 2 minutes, relax. Yeah. With racing, it's not like that. And I find with racing, one of the biggest things, I relate it to like golf. Now, am I right in saying that it's one of the hardest mentally challenging sports that you can do?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of aspects to racing that some other sports don't have. And a lot of it comes off the track, right? There's a large political factor, which I'm sure a lot of sports have. But with racing, I mean, it's kind of like golf if you had to buy a new set of clubs every shot, right? Oh my God. So, racing has this added dynamic that it costs a lot of money, even at lower levels of racing, right, to do the sport.
How much was it to get into like karts?
Yeah, so in go-karts, I mean, you can run a club level go-kart for relatively cheaply, right? Like
what's cheap though?
Under $10,000.
Okay, that's not
bad.
But
you have teams out there and drivers out there that are spending $1 million on a go-kart program for a season, and then you get into cars, and those numbers as you move up, they tend to amplify. And I mean, if you look at drivers that are in Formula 2, for example, which is like right under Formula 1, they're spending $2-3 million a year to be in those seats. And the added dynamic is not the fact that it costs money. I think people understand that it costs money. The added dynamic of the fact is that the driver is not just a driver. Then the driver is a spokesperson. The driver is a negotiator. The driver is a brand ambassador. to try to generate sponsorship and interest in him to progress his or hers, to progress their career forward. Right. So there's that added dynamic. And you can be the greatest driver in the world, but if you can't talk on camera or you can't relate to people, you're not going to get anywhere, and vice versa. Right. So you can be, the most marketable guy in the world, but if you can't drive, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's a tough balance.
You need like you said, it's a balance of both.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Jesse, I really appreciate you saying that. Can you talk a little bit about the thinking process during a race? Like, what's your mind going through? What mental blocks do you have to surpass? Is it like for example, okay, I'll quickly say to the average person, I'll approach a corner in my car, my Mercedes that I think is, a racing AMG GT. It's not. And I'll approach a corner like 60 and it's like a whole like actual bend. And I'll be like, okay, no, I have to stop. I won't just take it. My car can't take it. But if I even had a car that could take that corner at 60, I don't think my body or like my brain would allow me to take that corner. Sure. Because I'd just be so scared.
Yeah, your fear mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So how do you overcome that? What's your thinking process like? And how fast do you have to make decisions, even on the fly when a guy's right next to you or on your ass behind you? Like, what kind of things do you have to think about?
Yeah, so to scale it back, when you first start, which for most people is at quite a young age, and every kind of time you get into a new car, you have to focus some mental effort on the actual driving portion. Like, hey, where's my shift points? Am I turning in smooth enough? Am I braking at the right spot? Am I modulating the brakes properly? That type of thing. As time progresses and you get a little bit more experience, the driving side is not something that you're mentally thinking of. It becomes kind of into the subconscious or second nature. When you're in a race, you're thinking of strategy, right? How do I position myself to get to the front? Right? Now, should I pass this guy now? Is it better to stay behind him for a little while? Save my tires or whatever. So it's all about management of the car and your strategy to try to, get to the front. So there's a saying that lap time versus race time, right? You can have great lap time, right? But your race time may not necessarily be the best because you've burned the tires off or, whatever, you've clipped a curb and bent a wing or anything can happen, right? Oh. So you got to think, how do I lower my race time so that I'm the first one to the finish line at the checkered flag, right? You don't have to win the race on the first lap. Okay, so when you're out there driving and racing, you're thinking, hey, how do I get to the front in the most efficient manner and still keep the car under me so that I got something left at the end?
Right. So you're not trying to see, that's always interesting. I think a big misconception for just viewers like on F1, if they just popped on the television, is like, pass him. Like, just try to pass everybody you can right away in the fastest way possible. But what you're saying is there's a strategy behind maybe staying behind somebody. So you're thinking about, like, you have to save your tires. You can't overheat your brakes. I only know this just by watching the F1 series.
Yeah, well, and F1's very good at kind of explaining some of the strategy because, they all, or not all, but there's varying strategies between the teams and even inter-team strategies. Some guys are doing one stop, some guys are doing two stops, some guys are on, they have different tire
medium,
compounds. Yeah. And it all goes to that, how do I get the race time the least? And here's a classic example. Last week, we have a Williams who didn't pit for the whole race and pitted on the very last lap and was able to come 10th, which is unheard of for that car because the car's not very competitive.
Yeah, wait, right? I was going to say,
and they did that based on strategy. So he was out there, Albon is the driver, and he knew for the whole race, hey, listen, I can't burn off these tires because I got to run the whole race on these tires. So yeah, he could have probably made some crazy moves and late braked guys and done some passes and maybe got into some action. But he understood, hey, these guys are going to pit ahead of me, and that's where I'm going to have the advantage. Right?
So, okay, well, now that's actually really interesting. It seems like there's like different strategies that you can go to winning a race. If a Williams, and even I know a Williams is not a fast car. If a Williams can place 10th, and I remember seeing that, and I was like, how? And now that you just said that, it's like my jaws dropped that they actually did that. That is unheard of. But if a Williams can place 10th, will we start to see a strategy of less pitting? Or is that just crazy? Is that
no, because, I mean, there's only certain cars, certain tracks, and certain drivers that can pull those things off. And, there's drivers get a reputation for being either hard on the equipment or light on the equipment. I mean, you see a classic example in Red Bull right now. You've got one driver that's ultra quick, but really burns up the car. And then you've got the other driver that's, maybe not as quick as Max, but, Sergio, he can do a whole race on tires because he's always been known for being light on the tires. And it's all with how he drives. Very, very smooth inputs on everything. Very smooth turn-ins, very smooth on the brakes, very smooth on the gas, where Max is just like he's driving a go-kart. 110% at all time, hammering the brakes, hammering the throttle, spinning the tires.
I mean, sorry to cut you off, but you see him against Ferrari this season. And I remember, what was it? Second race of the season. And it was literally every single time he's late braking on the one apex and Leclerc just passes him after the second, but he kept doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking in my head, like, but why?
Why are you doing it?
Because he's going to pass you because he has DRS after.
And I think a lot of us were thinking that same thing.
Interesting. So is that okay? Now let's get into that. We won't dish any, but I'm really curious. Like, can you see another side of why they did that, or no? Was it just try to pass him right away?
Yeah, I think for Max always wants to fight from ahead, fight from in front. Right, that's his thing. He always wants to be in front at all costs. His belief is it's a difficult sport to pass in, which it is, even with DRS. And the best position is in front. You're out of the potential chaos, and you can kind of dictate the race. And that's his sole focus, where, some of the other drivers or some of the other teams understand, hey, listen, over a single lap, I can't be as fast as Max. I mean, he's on another level. He's crazy. So we have to do other things to make sure that we're faster at the end. Right, or different pitch strategy or whatever to get ahead of him.
Who do you think right now you watching? I know Alonso came back because he retired, right, and then he came back.
He did. Yeah.
So I think you mentioned Alonso. You probably think right now is still the best racer in the grid.
Yeah, I mean, I think on any given Sunday when you have equal cars, I think Fernando is the most well-rounded driver. And it comes from a lot of things. I mean, he's always been a great driver, but as time's gone on and as he's matured, I think he understands the cars. Even though we've got new cars, he understands just the general sense of the cars the best, and can pull it off. Now, over the course of a lap, would I pick Fernando in qualifying? Probably not.
Probably not, yeah.
Probably not, but over the course of a season, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. Okay, now, you mentioned one of the hardest challenges in racing, in making it to, the be-all, end-all F1, is politics. The politics behind the sport. And your brother told me a little bit about his story and how politics affected his story big time in him even making it to F1, and it's pretty demotivating, it seems like. So what were some tactics you used to fight the demotivation, or did you just love it so much that you didn't even care about the demotivation factor of politics and just thought, if it's meant to be, I'll go? What was your mind?
I think, you got to focus a little bit on your own program and your own deal and try to make the best of what the situation you have, the opportunity you have. And I'm of the belief that if you work hard and do your best and really don't get down on yourself and don't complain outwardly, that things will come right for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, being from Canada is not necessarily indicative. I mean, we got 2 Canadian Formula 1 drivers right now, but they're special cases. Not really necessarily indicative of making it in racing. And there's other factors, right? Like you got to try to find how you're unique and what you can provide to the people and groups that can help you move forward. And you got to try to place yourself in, the right position at the right time. And
you know what? I find it interesting because it does seem like sponsors are just like number one big thing in making it. And a good example of that, who was it? Ocon, I think, was it? Who he was like broke, like his family had no money, and I don't know where he grew up, but I think it was in Europe. And I guess he had like a guy reach out to him when he was in karts, and this guy was like some billionaire or something like that, and said, "Listen, like you're gonna go all the way, like this kind of stuff."
Well, that was Albon again.
Oh, Albon, yes,
Albon
that's right.
Again. And and that's just it. He was racing in karts at a high level. Against Russell, against Leclerc, against Max, and Norris, and he was fortunate to have that guy recognize him and help promote him through. And without that, I mean, he even admits, he wouldn't have made it out of karts, let alone anywhere near Formula 1.
Because I remember him saying, like in the docu-series, like his family had no money.
Yeah.
Like zero. Like
and there's a classic example. So he comes from Thailand. And,
that's right. Yes, from Thailand.
Not a historically country you'd see race car drivers come from, because there's very, very little domestic racing going on. And, with Formula 1, if Formula 1's your path, you got to get to Europe. That's the key. And you got to try to get there as early as you can, and to show the people there, and because that's where Formula 1 is centered, and show the people there that you can do it. And racing anywhere else is difficult.
Yeah, well, I hear you. I remember talking to you about that before, like how it really is. Like you go to Europe, you have a much higher chance of making it. And I feel like like where you and your brother were at, you guys had a very solid shot. And I mean, you were some of the best here. Like
when we had great opportunities, and we went to Europe and had varying success there. But and we're very thankful for our opportunities. Yeah, I mean, things didn't play out exactly as we wanted, but I mean, hey, we got to drive race cars, right? Like,
how cool is that?
How
yeah,
cool is that, right? And even just the story, and not only that, but being solely focused and solely dedicated to one thing growing up, it helps you in your future life to prioritize and know what it's going to take to get the job done. So, and it's not just with racing; it's with all sports. I think a lot of people, and people on you've had as guests here, you'll see that a lot of them played some type of sport at a decently high level.
Competitiveness.
Being competitive, and it's helped them in their future life, right? Just getting up in the morning, right? You have to get up in the morning to go and put in a day's work, right? And find your opportunities. And I think
Andrew would agree with you. He says when he's hiring, he'll look at somebody who's played sports. He always says, like, somebody who's played sports, and like one sport, not like 5 different ones. Now, granted, if they played 5 different ones at like, AAA level, high level, okay, well then, you're on, I don't know why you're not in some pro league, but.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, he's right. You got to, it's the funnel effect, right? I played hockey until the point where I couldn't play hockey and race, right? Mm-hmm. And then I made the decision, listen, yeah, I'm okay at hockey, but, racing's a different thing.
You love racing.
I love
choose racing every day.
And racing's me, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what I did. And
so let me ask you, you now come from the racing world. There's so many more stories we could get into, and maybe I'll ask you one to close the podcast, but coming from the racing world and now coming into what you do now, being a real estate agent, what was some of the things you learned from racing that you were able to kind of bring in? Like you just mentioned playing the competitive sports. How?
Yeah, I think just what I mentioned, the work ethic and, knowing what it's going to take, the effort you have to put in to do something right. Another thing that I find I'm good with is attention to detail. And that's very important in racing, not only when you're driving, but when you're building, engineering the cars. If you make one small mistake at 200 miles an hour, it's amplified. It becomes a big mistake.
Yeah.
So, attention to detail is one thing that I like to say I learned at a young age and has helped me through my life. And, again, just the focus, right? Focus. Don't look all over the place and get distracted by things around you. This is your job right now. This is what you got to focus on.
Well, I can speak truly to that because I know you personally. Now, I want to ask you current state of F1. Like, we're seeing some rule changes, that kind of thing. But this political talk is becoming more and more evident. And literally, like, even the docu-series was owning up to it, how political it is. So, like, what are your thoughts and opinions on that, if we can get into the honesty part of it, as well as does this need to change for the sport to be more viewer-friendly, I guess?
Well, I think like a lot of things in life, it's cyclical. In terms of the politics in Formula One, they had in the 80s when Bernie took over and all that kind of stuff happened, it was very political. And then it kind of, during the what we'll call Ferrari years, it kind of subsided a little bit. And now it's coming back up a bit. I think the new cars are great. I think it's a new challenge for the drivers because the new cars inherently have understeer, which is, you turn and the car just wants to go straight versus some of the old cars.
Like intentionally they have understeer.
Just the way that the rules are written, they're more on the front axle than the rear. So, if you look at like a sprint car, for example, they're sliding the car through all the corners, right?
Yeah,
so
it's literally like a drift race.
that car has oversteer, so it wants to spin every time you turn it, where, an understeering car is like a road car. Most road cars have understeer, so you turn and the car wants to go straight. It doesn't want to spin. And that's a little bit of a differentiator in Formula One now, that the cars are understeer. So you have drivers that prefer cars with understeer, and then you have drivers that prefer cars with oversteer, and you see those guys are having a little bit more trouble adapting. But it's always good when you have a shakeup of the rules, especially for the fans, because you have now Ferrari is the best car in
which
the grid.
I love. Yeah, I love seeing variety now. We're seeing Red Bull and Ferrari go at it.
Yeah, so, for the hybrid era so far, it's been Mercedes, really, since 2013. And, even though that's great for Mercedes and, the sport is still good and competitive and there's always that benchmark to get, the fans are like, oh, well, yeah, Mercedes is going to win.
Yeah.
Why would I watch? Where now, we've got some, more dynamic races. We kind of don't know what's going to happen, which is great and is drawing people in. I think we saw in Australia they had 490,000 people at the race.
Holy smokes.
And, that's from a number of factors. They haven't had a race for a couple of years because of COVID, but that's a huge number at the track. And
watching live, that's insane.
And really good for the sport. And I think, Liberty, who owns Formula One now, has done some really good things on the media side. You talked about the Drive to Survive, which is a cool series, kind of into the background. Maybe not something a pure fan would find a lot of interest in, but cool for those kind of fringe fans.
And now you're bringing it's really smart. Sorry to cut you off, but you're bringing those fringe fans in, which is like me. And I'm a prime example.
And that's what all sports really want to do. They know their core fan base is always going to be there, right? Like me, I'm always going to be a Formula One fan, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Right. But, it's trying to bring those fringe people in to build the fan base into the center that is really going to help the health of the sport. So, yeah, it's cool the way it is now. And it's good to see other teams battling up front. And, and as for the politics, well, I think politics are always going to be there in Formula One. And with the way that the teams are set up now with kind of team principles, all always at odds with each other, being kind of the spokesperson for the team. You know, it makes it interesting.
I like the drama factor of it. I think it just adds to the entertainment. I mean, every sport, the way they make their most money is through the entertainment of the sport, not the actual sport itself.
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, and it goes down. Yeah. Like that's how you get sponsorships, right? You have to be good on camera so you can like pick up people can like you. If people are fans of you, they'll buy merchandise of you, and F1 will make money. The sponsors will make money. Right. So every sport at that high level, you need to have sponsors. Like an NHL, the NHL would not be around if there were no fans. Like,
of course,
literally,
yeah,
how would you make money playing a sport?
Exactly.
You're really not providing a service to anybody
right.
tangibly. You're just providing entertainment.
You're an entertainment.
Exactly. And that's not a bad thing. It's just one of those things that I think a lot of people have come to terms with, but you need to understand that's how you make things entertaining, right? Like you said, the Drive to Survive series was honestly such a smart thing for them to start doing. And it's like, it is bringing fringe fans in because it's so interesting. I love the
Well,
adrenaline.
I think, you get an idea. It humanizes the sport a bit, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's tough because when you're watching cars go around, even though there's a human operating it, your brain's like, okay, it's a car. I'm a fan of the car. And NASCAR's had, this issue for a long time where I'm a fan of that black number 3.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, yeah, it's Dale Earnhardt. I didn't know. Right? But, and so trying to humanize it and bring the drivers into, like other sports do, into the limelight is good. And that's, and Formula One's doing a good job of that now in, showing the different personalities that make up the drivers and showing what it takes to be there.
Exactly.
And how their relationships are with each other and with the teams and everything else.
And all the behind the scenes stuff, just in terms like Ricardo leaving Renault to go to Ricardo leaving Red Bull to go to Renault when those two were fighting. Like that's like, holy smokes, how could you do that? And then you even saw the behind the scenes of what the conversation was like. And I mean, that's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
To see.
And it shows the motivations of the drivers, right? Like you see, if that's a prime example, a guy leaves, the best car in the grid to go to a midfield team.
Yeah.
But the motivation is, listen, I'm up against Max at Red Bull, right? Whether I believe I'm better than him or not, Red Bull's never going to give me the opportunity to beat him, right? They're always going to give Max a little bit more. A little bit more effort, the new developments, whatever else. So I'm always going to be playing second string, right? And so why don't I go to a team that, maybe they're not so good right now, but I'm going to be the focus. They're going to think I'm a superstar, and they're going to put the effort behind me, and you never know, maybe we can get there.
That's interesting stuff. Well, listen, Jesse, last question to anybody giving a listen to today's episode. Hopefully they enjoy Formula One or just racing in general. Like for any racers, any advice on getting through the mental blocks of like, or just trying to pick up sponsors or anything like that you could give?
Yeah, I mean, lots of advice. I think, one of the things is you got to focus on your craft, but you also got to have a good team around you. And, that would be my advice is, even if your team is just your parents, try to use the people around you to get in and have them have a similar ideals as you to try to push you forward and get the word out. Yeah. Right. Because, it's going to start off when you're young with, hey, the company my dad works for, or my dad's company, or, the neighbor's company. And, anybody that can, see the vision for you is going to help you out. And then that will kind of radiate out. But, if you're in a position to be able to, get a coach, a driver coach is important, especially when you're young, to, get rid of any bad habits, help you with techniques, and then, help you with navigating not only the driving side of things, but how the sport works and moving through the ranks is, just somebody to be there to be a soundboard even.
No, I love it. Thank you for giving that. Jesse, you're also a realtor, which we can't forget about this podcast. So where can people reach you to use a guy that's really personable and just enjoyable to be around, and is very logistical and smart. So where can people reach you?
Yeah, so I work for Royal LePage NRC out of the Niagara Falls office, and you can reach me on the social media, or my email address is jmason@royallepage.ca, and I'm always willing to help, willing to talk through things, even if it's just a little bit of advice. I'm always there.
Fantastic, brother. Well, thank you, Jesse. I appreciate it. Even a little plug to real estate, but I'm glad that we didn't focus just on that today.
Sure.
I'm actually glad that we got into this story. So thank you for joining us, and viewers, thank you. And I hope you enjoyed the episode, and stay tuned for next week's episode. And we have a special one. Thank you so much. All the best. Cheers. Thank you for listening to this week's Golden Guest on the Meeting Gold podcast. If you learned something from today's episode, make sure to check out our other content on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, and YouTube. Also, make sure to leave us a follow while you're there. Thanks, and have a golden day.